Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. It's good to see folks coming into this webinar. We're very excited that you have joined us for today's Action Impact Sustainability Forum, sponsored by InvestHER Strategies and Forex Global Consulting, where I serve as the Chief Sustainability Officer in Residence. I'm Christy Cook. I'll be your moderator today. I will be monitoring the chat as well, so drop questions in there. But our today's discussion is about sustainability and operational excellence. Today, you're going to hear how leading operational excellence can deliver real savings, 5 to 7% in the middle of your P&L, without compromising quality or service, and while enhancing and advancing your sustainability goals. Now, I know we had some people have questions about that 5 to 7%, so we'll definitely talk about that and go into detail. We do have a packed agenda today, so please, again, use the chat if you have any questions. We'll weave in as many as we can, and anything we miss, we'll follow up with you afterwards. At Forex, we believe sustainability shouldn't feel like one more thing. Through our approach, Sustainability Simplified, we help organizations embed it directly into daily operations. That's also why I created Action Impact, a space where food service leaders turn sustainability from an overwhelming challenge into a strategic advantage. Even though I've been in sustainability for 20 years, I started as a food service operator. I know firsthand that great sustainability starts with great operations, serving our customers well, empowering employees, and managing resources wisely, not wildly, wisely, folks. So when we talk about middle of the P&L, we're talking about food cost containment, labor productivity, and controllables. You might not think those have a lot to do with sustainability, but by the end of today's discussion, you'll see exactly how they do. And I'm confident you'll leave with at least one idea, hopefully several, so you can get that cumulative savings of up to 5 to 7% that you can take back right away. So folks, I have some fantastic folks joining me today. Today, we have Rick Green, the head of Culinary for Guckenheimer, and Tony Benedia, senior consultant for strategy and operations at Forex Global Consulting. Together, they bring decades of experience and a wealth of real-world examples that connect operational excellence with sustainability impact. So I'm excited for this, and let's get started. We're going to kick it off with you, Rick. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and why are you passionate about food and sustainability?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Christy. I appreciate it. And Tony, it's a pleasure to sit on the panel with you. So for me, 30 years of experience total in the culinary arts field. And so, a range of different exposures and opportunity from Johnson Wales University, where I earned a bachelor's degree in science and working in Michelin restaurants, more farm-to-table restaurants, casual dining, owning a B2C catering company. And then as of late, 8 years with ISS Guckenheimer. And really for me, it's, sharpening my craft over the last 30 years has been, an amazing journey for me. And I think landing with Guckenheimer has just really, fine-tuned that, the experience I've had, and really just, kind of looking at the food from a different lens, looking at, sustainability is a big part of that, and our company initiatives and how they align with our client goals. And really for us, focusing on hospitality, serving amazing food is really what we're about, hospitality and food. Looking at our community and vendor partnerships, striving for innovation is huge for us, whole person health, and obviously sustainability. So for us, having that opportunity, in my mind, I feel like I've got the best job on the planet, and really just, with the responsibility of taking care of our guests, taking care of our team really is important, and also that we care about our planet, right? And so for us, it's going through the motion, not going through the motions, but we walk the talk, right? And that's a big thing for me. And so I'm curious to hear Tony and his background as well.
Yeah, Tony, tell us more.
Thanks, Christy. It's great to be with you all, especially Chef Rick. Not highlighted in my profile. After a brief retirement, I was asked to consult on a couple of different projects. Two for some national companies focusing in on growth and retention, and the other two were smaller startups focusing in on operational excellence. And after relocating after 25 years back to Chicago from Phoenix, believe it or not, I felt I can bring greater value by joining Forex, who has a tremendous amount of resources and support. And it helped me along with my balance of quality of life and that I desired, during retirement. So it's great to be with Forex. Fortunately, in my career, I've had many excellent mentors, and My main objective in my role is to come alongside organizations and business leaders and help them achieve their vision of growth, retention, and operational excellence and experiencing sustainable results. And that's what really motivates me. And I know the question, you talk about my passion for operational excellence. I posted a while back, OpEx is a strategic business philosophy focusing on continually improving an organization's process and systems. It enhances efficiency, reduces waste, and delivers superior value to the customers. What I want to do just for a second is take just a quick deeper dive into no particular order, 5 things the way I view OpEx. First is the customer focus and satisfaction, and that leads to organic growth, repeat business, and new customers. Second is employee empowerment, which is having a high quality trained staff. Then you could implement the change and they take ownership and have great insights when you have a highly motivated staff. The quality and safety piece is the highest standards of food service and ambiance, and top level occupational and food safety standards is the third pillar. Fourth, I looked at efficiency and profitability, looking at productivity, streamlining costs, minimizing waste, and technology and data analysis. And the last piece of operational excellence, last but not least, is continuous quality improvement, which is a commitment to innovation. And the way I view innovation is taking something existing and making it better, or something creating brand new, whether it be for out of the box or for that particular unit. So back to you, Christy. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Well, I think one of the things that stands out to me, Chef, is how you were talking about taking care of your teams. I really like that. And Tony, I hear you on operational excellence, and I want to actually keep on this for just a second because again, I had some questions about folks saying 5 to 7%, the middle of the P&L. That's interesting. Tell me more. So Tony, I want you to just talk a bit about that and tell us about that operational framework. Now you gave us that framework actually, I believe in the discussion a bit, but tell us a little bit about why are you so confident in these numbers? That's what I'd like to know.
Yeah, that's a great question. When you're in business a very long time, you see plenty of operations that need support and frankly fixing. And when you're in diverse situations, you accumulate a lot of best practices. And not everyone will achieve, the 5.5 to 7.5%. Some are at different levels of execution, right? Some more, some less. But if you could obtain 2 or 3 ideas, as you mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, there's some value add, right? So I'll just use an example. Early in my career, there was a seasoned team in a very large operation, and they were 4 points lower than anybody in the whole territory on food cost. They were getting a lot of accolades. I would say they were a bit overconfident. When I was introduced as the leader, I asked a simple question. I said, "What is your ideal food cost?" And the end result was they found additional 3 points. It was based on taking the business and breaking it down to various P's and P&Ls. They took the catering business, they looked at the profitability, they looked at the cafe business, they looked at the C-store. Even with the catering, they broke it down by customer. They broke it down by each service, from box lunches all the way through receptions. The individual stations in the cafe, they did a P&L. They looked at productivity and profitability of each station. And on the C-store, they looked at product mix, movement, and placement. In addition to the 3 points in food, they also found 2.5 points in labor and 1 point in controllables, meaning 6.5 points on a $4 million location dropped $260,000 to the bottom line on a showcase account and a model of excellence. I have a saying, if it's not broken, break it and make it better. Our statement about my confidence about saving costs in the middle of P&L without sacrificing quality and service, it's based on fact-based data and having a committed team of leadership that's not afraid to challenge the status quo.
I like it, man. So it sounds like, it's proven. You've been doing this. You gave us a solid example about that. Rick, tell us about your initial reaction when we were talking about 5 to 7%. Were you like, you're crazy, Christy? Or were you like, no, I've been doing this too, 30 years, many kitchens. What was your reaction? Tell us a little bit about that and about your perspective and how it's possible.
Yeah, excuse me. Thank you, Christy. I appreciate that. And for me, it's in listening to Tony's spiel about it too. For me, it's about understanding your financials, right, and really digging into your P&L and actually understanding it, right. And so, for me, 100% obtainable, yes. And I'll dive deeper into that when we get into each category, but kind of high level. For me, it's all about systems and tools, really, and actually how to use them, right, and how to effectively use them, right. And so, for me, it's all these categories. It's about being proactive instead of reactive, right. And so, if you have a food cost exception, what are the categories you're going to look at, right? And we'll dive into those deeper too. But same thing with labor and controllable costs, right? And so, and one of my favorite quotes is in all of these categories, it's easy in financials, right? When you're trying to make an assessment on where you're at and how to improve it, it's oftentimes, easier to, like, people think it's easier to find like the dollar bills that are floating around in your financials, right? Like oh yeah, I can, save money on this delivery or whatever. But truly, it's the nickels and dimes that really add up, right? And so I think somebody used an analogy one time, like if you go to 7-Eleven and you see a penny or a nickel on the ground, are you going to pick it up? In this day and age, probably not. But back in our youth, probably for sure, right? You could have bought some candy with it or made a phone call, whatever. But those nickels and dimes add up to dollar bills, right? And if you look at that, at a unit level, and then you multiply that by, by week, by month, by end of year, and then you multiply those numbers by an organization that maybe have 150 accounts, then those numbers are astronomical, right? That little nickel and dime adds up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? And so through this process, there's a lot of tools that are implemented. We don't have to recreate the wheel. I think it's just really that financial acumen and accountability that really, kind of changes that mindset. And I think it's also the other part that's key, in my opinion, is it's great that you know it, but does your staff know it? And does your staff eat and breathe it, right? And so, like in my kitchens, like with food costs, I always on a whiteboard, always wrote what my food cost, where I was at versus theoretical, or what my goal was. And I talked about it in our shift meetings. Same with labor, all these costs that we talk about. If you know it, amazing. But if your staff doesn't know it and know when you're talking, hey, labor's high, we got to work together, let's cross train, maybe we're going to cut a couple hours here and there. Those are opportunities that you can do that. But if your team's not aware of it, then you don't have the buy-in to be able to support it. And I always like to say 20 minds are better than one. And it's a group effort to be able to achieve those goals.
Absolutely. 20 minds are better than one. I like that. Yeah. Well, Tony, I want to jump back to you real quick too. Let's talk a little bit just what's going on in food service right now. Tell us from your perspective, just a little bit about what some opportunities are right now.
That's a really big question. If you look at our goal here is the middle of the P&L intersection with sustainability. I'll try to keep it brief because our topic's on really the middle of the P&L.
Yeah.
And, in my experiences when analyzing an account, I always focus on the middle of the page first, the middle of the P&L, because if you have a tight middle, then when you start driving sales, you have predictable results, right? You understand flow through and the profitability, because we all know that increased sales sometimes masks costs, right? So, looking at, the big picture of what's happening, I mean, it's no secret that there's been double-digit inflation on food, during COVID, right? A lot of it's due to high production, overhead, transportation costs, fuel prices, supply chain disruptions, weather affecting crops, et cetera, et cetera. The good news is that the CPI, I guess we could somewhat look at it as good news. The CPI for the balance of the year, it's about 2.7%, and it's manageable, right? So the opportunity I see, a lot of operators were slow to respond to COVID when it came to pricing. So what happened was, pricing was not as aggressive as inflation. So there was a gap. And so we're hoping that today you'll get some ideas on how to close that gap through operational excellence in managing the food cost side of the business. And we'll have some tools later to talk about that we'll actually pass on. Now, when it comes to labor, obviously there's tons of shortages. Getting the right people in the right jobs at the right times will solve a lot of labor issues in a lot of companies that are experiencing that right now. There's going to be a lot of structural transformation that will create jobs and growth in frontline roles, such as healthcare, manufacturing, and the trades. Businesses adopting strategies using AI and automation and outsourcing. and asset management, which is another thing in the labor market where you have a lot of building capacity with flex hours that happened during COVID. So looking at the assets, saying, how do we maximize this opportunity? In regards to overall labor, costs are up about 3.5% from year over year. So whoever really wins the talent war, creating an environment where employees feel value and growth opportunities, will have a team available to execute the goals that are hard to achieve if you're shorthanded, right? So innovation, out of the box thinking will be necessary. Later, I think you might have a question regarding the labor market, and we'll take a deeper dive into that. And real quickly, when it comes to overall expenses, depending on what research you're doing, there was an 18.4 increase in paper and cleaning during COVID, right? And we're showing a slowing of about 1.2% for the balance of the year. A lot of it has to do with raw material scarcity, supply chain disruptions, high energy costs, et cetera, and then shrinkflation, which is really reducing the size and not changing the sticker price. The opportunity I see in controllables is that primarily in food service, you focus on food and labor, but taking a deeper dive into controllables, office supplies, paper cleaning, replacement costs, maintenance and repair, and effective negotiations could help you close that gap. And before I go on, because you asked about what's happening in food service in general, I'll be remiss not to talk about some trends that are coming. I'm sure Chef Rick is well aware of this, but the evolving definition of value impacting the consumer behavior is coming to the forefront. Thinking about smaller portions at a less price equals less waste. Bundling smaller portions like tapas is an example. Reequating millennials as they reach their middle age to changing landscape and nutrition labels and food certification. 62% of customers are interested in unique coffee. Think about barley and mushroom. You see a lot of advertising commercials on. Continued global flavors and fusion. 34% are interested in Haitian cuisine. So, breaking it out to the various different tastes, global flavors, sustainable kitchens, plant-based eating, zero waste, health and wellness, intensified, vibrant, exotic flavors, including the crunch factor, which I thought was pretty interesting. Sustainable seafood, and usually like we're in the early stages of AI when it comes to integration, speed of service, pre-ordering. Also, there's a focus on getting back into the in-dining experiences. So just a little highlight on what's coming, Christy. So I'm sorry I took so long on that, but I thought it was really important. It's a big topic. So
That's a lot. That's a lot. That's not a little, Tony. That's a lot. That was good though. That's a lot to take in. And I think that what I want to do is make sure that the team gets to hear some things now too and engage. So team, we're going to start you off with a poll question here. So everyone listening gets to do some questions, and I'm going to launch some of these questions here real quick and give you a little time to answer those. So please look at there's 4 questions. And if for some reason you're not seeing them, please ping me in the chat, someone. But what I want to do while you're doing this is just share a quick story about this, really. But I've been working with ReFed and the World Wildlife Fund for the U.S. Food Waste Pact members. And what we're doing is focusing on reducing waste for large events. And out of the 6 pilot sites, only 1 used production sheets and recipe specs. So 4 used technology to measure waste. But even then, those tools weren't really effectively used and definitely not consistently. So both of these productions processes, as well as tracking technology, they're essential for to find efficiency and cost savings. So here's the truth of it is that processes and technology don't save you money if your team's not using them. So if we think about that and see some of the results in this, and I'm just going to shut down this poll and see where we're at right now. But to what degree do you believe processes and technology is helping folks? Very effective. is the key winner. Agreed. I think everyone on this team would agree. I hope people are using them. To what degree they're being utilized, moderately is what we're seeing. Are you currently measuring food waste? Yes, we see some, I don't know, or none of these, and it's about even between some of the tracking technology on food waste. And so one of the things we're also hearing is, especially on food waste, food cost containment itself, there's a ton of opportunity in food waste. So Tony, I want to come back to you real quick on this before I go back to Chef, because you talk about the waste bucket, which is paper tracking. That I'm calling it paper tracking. It's a non-tech solution. It's highly effective for operational processes if you don't have the other resources in there. If you can understand where, how, and when it happens, it can save you impact on P&L and on sustainability outcomes. But how do you communicate that triple impact to operators, helping them see food waste reduction, helping them understand that it's not just good for the planet, it's good for the community and good for business? So how do you do that, Tony?
Yeah, to your point, I mean, waste bucket's been around for decades, right? And in my travels, few have really implemented it, and even fewer have done it correctly. And to your point, there's a lot of sophisticated systems out there, which I'm sure Rick will address. But no matter what system, to do it correctly, we have a huge impact on cost and waste reduction. And I visited an operation that really was a best practice. They took it to the next level, and they really isolated the impact. So we really had some good fact-based data. They lowered their food costs by 2.5 points, and they lowered their waste in the back of the house by 30%. And it was an investment of less than $1,000 per kitchen. And a couple areas to note, and I'll be very brief. They shared the vision, established the goal and the purpose with all team members. They shut off their garbage disposals. They eliminated all their trash cans except for recycling. They mandated that nothing get thrown out. They had a post-production meeting, and they weighed, counted, logged, valued, talked about next steps. Where there were multiple kitchens, they took photos and they sent it on to the GM. And they increased their participation due to batch cooking because it equated to better food quality. They worked with the client and they developed a composting program. They networked with local media, so the client got a lot of tremendous recognition. They strengthened their partnership, their retention efforts, and they even communicated documents to take home for the customers and the clients and the food service employees. I have a quote. It says, "If you measure it, it will improve." And I think by measuring this as a simple, basic tool, I mean, the results are there. The last comment I want to make is that I have a former leader who was a professional athlete, and he made a comment that really resonated with me. He said, "When you come to a ball game late, what's the first thing you ask? You want to know the score, right?" He says, "Why don't we share the score with our team?" Right? So you have to be wise, and you have to use discretion on what exactly you're going to share. But sharing what the goals are, what the results are, and celebrating that with your team members, it really creates harmony and really creates a dynamic team. And that's the last thing I want to say on that. So
Thanks, Tony. So, Rick, I want to come over to you on this because you've been in all kinds of different kitchens for over 30 years. I'm sure you've seen it all from waste buckets to obviously winnow technology, which what you're using. So, how has that use of tech changed the way your teams operate, and what kind of impacts are you seeing on the ground through that technology use?
Yeah, for sure. So for us, I mean, the ever evolving evolution of technology and specifically around AI is ever changing, right? And so what's working today, 5 years from now, it may be completely upside down. But specifically with our with Winnow at ISS Guckenheimer, we use Winnow and the majority of our accounts, and really it's that partnership with them. And so for us, it's AI technology that's able to that recognizes the waste that's in the bin. It weighs it, and then what it'll do is it'll populate it onto a dashboard. And so for us, our chefs at the unit level are able to see real-time data like to the minute. And so you could check it out, midway through service for production. You could check it and obviously look at it end of day. And so what we're able to do, the unit level can see it. We can see it on a regional level, and we can see it on a national level, which is really huge for us from a large organization. And so what do we do with the data, right? And so for us, we look at the data, with a fine-tooth comb. And so for us, it'll show us like what our top 10% use, offenders are by category. And so for us, even at the unit level, it disciplines our chefs to be able to look at like, are we maximizing our production pars effectively? Are we using production sheets? And then also how to reimagine the ingredients that we potentially could, repurpose, add into a stock, maybe make some cool recipes out of, things that would potentially go into compost. And so for us, we have a development kitchen in South San Francisco, and we launched where we created a zero waste cookbook where we took intel from the field, and we used the data that we collected from Winnow, and we're able to create a beautiful cookbook. There's a digital copy available online as well, where it really challenged us as culinarians to really think outside of the box, right? And so things that would potentially, it could go to compost, but could we make it to a point where it has zero waste effect to it, which we did successfully. And it was a lot of fun, right? It was a huge challenge for us to be able to look at things like watermelon, like, when we do our health bars, we're trimming up fruit for fruit salads and things like that. And watermelon, it was a big one, right? And so, we were able to, one of our teams created a watermelon rind kimchi, which was really cool, right? And it was an accompaniment that we used for one of our Korean smash burgers, which was awesome, right? So it's just kind of reimagining things. But other components too, outside of technology too, that you can look at is just what's being returned. I always like to camp out in the dish drop area to see what's coming back on plates. If it's catering, if you get a whole pan of black beans that come back, look at it, taste it, right? Is it perfect? Is it, maybe the quality is not great, or another chance to look at your production parts, right? And so going back to Winnow with us, we were able to reduce our food waste by over 60%, which equals, close to over $1 million in savings annually. And so, again, little details like that add up to big picture, right? And so if you have the systems in place, make sure you understand how to use them is my advice. Make sure you're monitoring it. And then Tony, to your point, posting the data, right? Making sure everybody's aware of it and really getting that buy-in and that investment, right? Because again, that 20 minds versus one, right? You can do all this stuff you want with the data, but if it's not contagious with your team, and also sharing the data points with your guests, it's huge, right? So that they understand when you're featuring a dish that may be zero waste or low carbon impact, upcycled, things like that, regenerative, that they understand the story behind it. And to me, those are huge differentiators.
Jeff, how are you seeing, going back to your customers and their reactions and sharing this information, what kind of feedback are you getting generally when you're providing this education, this reasoning for different things? What kind of, does that deepen a relationship? Do you get pushback? What are you seeing right now with that?
Great question. I feel like they love it. And as for us, it's the storytelling, right? Is the big part, right? And so what I find too is a lot of the clients' initiatives are in parallel with ours, right? And so it's just really that partnership, right? And so for us, what I'd like to do is, they may have initiatives that we partner with, but also for us, it's also taking the initiative and saying, hey, we're not doing this now currently, but if we do this, then there's the outcome from it, right? And so it's that storytelling and it's getting that investment from the initial phase. Then once they see it deployed, then they're like, oh yeah, I remember us talking about that. That's really cool. And so people oftentimes, their food architecture, food choice, may be dependent on that. Like, hey, I can actually make a difference. It feeds me, nourishes me, right? It may fit my health and well-being goals, but also deeper dive that my choice can help make an impact on the planet, in the environment. A lot of people have that just natural gravitation. And also too, I think it's gentle nudging too is also, kind of a cool thing. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll do samples of dishes that may be a blended burger, that may be, 50% upcycled ingredients, plant-based, where a guest may not typically order, if they want a burger, they may not order that specifically, but if you do a gentle nudge and say, hey, we're going to offer a tasting for you today, or a blind tasting or a free sample, they'll try it. And our job as culinarians is to really make, a lot of times people think, oh, if it's healthy for you, it doesn't taste good. But I completely turn that upside down, because if you're a good chef, you can make really anything taste amazing. And so it's really that storytelling and getting people like sampling your food, right? Chefs are passionate about what we do. And so it's a great way for us to be able to present to our guests what we're doing and really create that story why.
Absolutely. So I will tell Tony and Rick, there is a good Q&A question If you look at your toolbar at the bottom, if you want to answer that through the chat as we're talking, feel free. But if not, don't worry, we'll get to it at the end. I just wanted to call that feature out to you. So one of the things that we want to do next is also get another poll question out to the group. And I am going to do a poll this time around labor, because we want to move on to discussing a little bit about labor here. And if I can get this poll activated, come on. Sorry, folks. Back. There it goes, labor. All right, so that is now launched, and just, the discussion around food cost itself, there were a number of items listed in between what Chef mentioned, what Tony mentioned, that weren't even on the list. But because you were doing one thing, there were multiple other actions that you took. And so great discussion on that. Moving towards labor a little bit, I want to talk about labor, because I often hear we can't focus on sustainability because we don't have the labor dollars. And it drives me nuts, frankly, because I believe operational excellence is sustainability. Yes, you can hire sustainability roles that do labor and take that up, but we've already talked about ways you don't need that. So one quick story is I've been working with a large grocer that wanted to make to move more of their near expiry products, bakery specifically. So it's getting close to the end of its shelf life, but still great to eat soon. So we combined some quick education for the customers. We did some smarter placement of this bread in 40 stores. And the simple thing that happened is that this simple shift, it increased the customers' awareness of this, helping them understand they can save money, prevent waste. It made it easier for employees to identify this product. It made it easier for them to donate. So the result, increased sales, reduced waste. Therefore, they were also saving money because they weren't paying for the composting program. They had increased donations and less labor. A simple operational change. And so I do believe fully that sustainability is part of smarter operations. And let's see what the folks think about the poll results as well. So the largest challenge around labor, training and consistency. Good, we're going to talk about that. Whose job is sustainability? I love that no one said not mine, because sometimes I hear that. I love that it's everybody's. Absolutely. So thank you for those questions. There are some dedicated resources in corporate teams, 100% fair. So I'm going to actually switch over, and Tony, I want to talk to you just a little bit, because labor it's about, efficiency starts long before you schedule it, long before things get posted here. And you talk a lot about talent, Tony. And sometimes if you're not taking care of talent, that's actually a waste too. Wasted in training, wasted onboarding, wasted energy, retention, very powerful sustainability lever in operations. Why do you believe so many new managers are lost within 30 days, Tony? What can we do to interventions can we do to change that?
That's a very powerful question. And I really believe that if leadership is proactive in pursuing top talent, and make sure it's a cultural fit, turnover would drop dramatically. The annual cost of losing somebody is anywhere from 25% of their salary to 2 times, with some experts saying 4 times for highly specialized roles. I've been fortunate, throughout my career to hire hundreds of leaders and learn a lot of key initiatives from excellent mentors and stellar HR directors. And some of the things that they did, and there's innovative ways to recruit, and so it's really brainstorming on that. It's doing behavioral interviews and developing a list of those behavioral type questions. It's doing multiple interviews with different leaders, different circumstances, site visits, culinary concepts, as Chef probably knows, do a chopped version, establish relationships prior to hiring. If I read a book a while back, I'm sure many of you have, it's called Good to Great. And it talks about Wells Fargo. And what they did is they had a culture, of constantly interviewing. And when they found somebody who was great, they found a way to get him into the system. And they just made room for him and then worked it out. And they were proactively at building a bench. They looked at the overqualified strategy as far as return on investment, and they had referrals and signing bonuses. All this was done prior to hiring the person. So, once the person was aboard, they did a rigorous onboarding and orientation, and they also had several mentors um, with different expertise for this individual. They put them in a training location anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks, and not everybody can train. So it was normal. You go to your largest location and say, okay, you're going to train, but not everybody has the passion for training. So they made sure they have passionate trainers, and they gave them extra pay if the manager stayed for 1 year or longer. So there was an incentive to do the right thing. They trained in multiple locations. They had multiple experiences. They focused on work-life balance, well-being, and having resources, navigate through the systems and a coach, collaboration, teamwork, and meaningful connections. And I remember a while back, Gallup used to do a survey, and one of the surveys was, do you have a best friend at work? And it was an interesting question, but there's a direct correlation between having friendship at work and retention. So, what this group did is they made sure that there was a lot of team buildings and meaningful relationships and mentorship programs and senior leadership communication on an ongoing basis to do the temperature of the individual. 49 to 82% of managers leave because of poor supervision. And the millennials and Generation Z, 75% leave because of bad supervisor. An organization that trains their leaders, better understanding of the generations, which is really prevalent right now, will be ahead of the game when it comes to overall retention. But it's developing that culture of interviewing is key. And it's best time to interview is when you don't need somebody. So
Always, always. Rick, one of the things that stood out to me that you mentioned at the beginning is just whole person health. And, when you're thinking about labor challenges that you're seeing in the culinary world, does it shift culture from just cost savings to healthier, more sustainable workplace cultures, from firefighting to leading in some ways? How are you seeing, you know, what's happening with you in the culinary world when it comes to labor challenges?
Labor challenges. It's labor is always a challenge. It seems like, and especially I think in this day and age too, it's you know um, side hustles are so much easier, especially out of the pandemic, right? If you were furloughed or unemployed, the side hustle market was huge, right? And it's attractive, right? You can work when you want to, and you don't when you don't want to, and so I think I've seen a lot of people that do those, multiple versions of that, right? And I think back in Tony and my day or era, it was like our side hustle was getting a second job in a restaurant or a third job, and so I think that the even seeing some of the challenges, even in like the Michelin world, right? It's, for the first time, I think in my career, I've seen places posting jobs, right? Or opportunities, recruiting for frontline employees and or salary managers positions, right? In the past, they had stacks of resumes like knee deep. And so you see it at all levels of business. And so I think for me, that I think the biggest thing with labor and challenges is, it starts with hiring for sure. I always say my favorite quote is never hire out of desperation. And so if you have a void, you don't need to lower your standards if you're not getting the right candidates. The right candidate will come up. And I think the biggest part too is training and development, and not only just with the new placemakers, but also existing, right? And so for me, it's fortifying that relationship with your staff, right? I mean, I'm sure all of us have been thrown into like your first day, and it's like, oh, the kitchen's going down, and I need you on saute station, and you're trained by fire. And so I think really having a robust training program is huge, right? And Tony, I liked how you were talking about insensitizing, the people who are training, right? Spending that time, they're the cheerleaders, right? They're the ones that are really motivated to do that, right? They're passionate about what they do. They're passionate about training and coaching and developing their teammates, right? Another thing that I really, cross training is massive, right? And so I think that's another thing is how you can utilize your staff, and it also works on their development perspective too, right? And so it gives them an opportunity to be exposed to a different station, perhaps. And if so-and-so calls out sick, maybe they're the next in line. If you're garde manger, maybe you go into, the fry station, or maybe you go into saute or pantry. And so it's a great opportunity for them to get exposure to a station maybe they didn't have an opportunity for. I think another thing too is in talking about whole person health, and from a a dietary perspective, it's huge, but also from a mental status, right? So we do Fair Kitchens training at Guckenheimer as well, but also I think, so understanding that the level of stress that our, teammates go through or placemakers, ensuring that their mental health and their whole person health is also just as important to us, right? And so for me, also another part of that too is I've implemented like a 5-minute pulse check with my hourly teammates and even my salary managers too, right? Because I can't fix a problem if I know about it 6 months and you're down the road, you're upset and irritated, right? And so doing that 5-minute pulse check, throughout the day, it could be throughout the week, just really gives an opportunity for your teammates to understand, number one, you care, and a lot of times I find out that people sometimes just want to be heard. And so I think in closing, for me, I think also the biggest part too is your investment into your employees, right? And so for me, it's mentoring is huge, right? So it could be internal, but it also could be external, right? And so, it opens the door for many opportunities that you may not be exposed to. And with that, it helps develop your bench, right? And so it could be, developing your replacement, which is always huge. I know we've all been in the situation where like, oh my gosh, I'm ready to be promoted, but we don't have anybody that can replace you, or we haven't developed. And that's an opportunity that we as leaders can work on, is making sure our team is developed and ready for that next level to be promoted. But also it's that investment, right, which I think is huge.
Yeah. One thing occurred to me as we were talking. You guys are definitely giving us a lot of potential actions that aren't even on the list of 60 things that we were really even talking about. So I just want to assure listeners that you will get this full list, and you'll get these extra little nuggets that we're developing too. So stick around for that. I want to begin to think about controllables. And so this is our last section where we're really talking about controllables, moving into final poll questions. So I will instigate this new poll for everyone as well. So in this section, I want you to kind of imagine something here. Most operators do treat controllables as fixed when they're full of hidden leaks. And I'm curious of obviously people's reactions to this, because you're going to see this, but think about that subscription, that Wall Street Journal article, New York Times article, or Hulu, or whatever Peacock that you got because you wanted to watch that game and you forgot about your subscription. That's how I think sometimes people think of controllables, or, hey, we always need towels. We need those linens. We need those disposables. But a lot of times when you have that overstocked cooler or that shelf that's full of disposables, it creates a surplus, and people kind of take it for granted. There's research on this that visible abundance can lead to higher use. So just thinking about that, I'm curious what some of our poll results are, how they feel about controllables being full of hidden leaks. Oh my gosh, I love that 3 to 6 people are looking at their controllables weekly or monthly. Absolutely. I understand how people, look at this and manage this, but this is really great to know. And the contract question, how familiar are you with your contract? Excellent. I know it inside and out. I love that. That's amazing. And that's hugely important. So thank you for sharing that. So what we're going to do now is kick this off into talking about controllables. And we're going to think about this. So Tony, I'm going to jump to you on this and thinking about, because you talk about contracts a lot in our conversations. What's an example of a negotiation lever that really delivers meaningful savings through the use of just knowing your contract? I want to share more value about that.
Okay, well, thanks, Christy. Understanding the contract is a key initiative for any transition, whether it be new business or location or district management. It's absolutely critical. Thorough review as well as all amendments. And I remember in the past, you have evergreen contracts that go on forever, and there may be decades of changes, and ensuring that they're memorialized. And a lot of them sometimes get misplaced. So what I would do is check with senior leadership on those situations to maybe generate a clean version of a contract. And you might find some scope creep, which is services that you're providing not in your contract that you're paying for. The prior company I used to work for, we did a study on contracts, and the average contract review saved anywhere from $5,000 to over $100,000 a year, with the average being about $15,000 per contract. I'll give you a specific example. About 10 years ago, we were awarded a new sale, And the RFP did not include legacy responsibilities of the prior contractor. And so we didn't include those costs in our pro forma because it would have changed the deal. The prior contractor, this is one of many different things that were not in the contract. They cleaned all the dining rooms and also took care of the trash for 15 locations after breakfast, throughout lunch, and at the end of the day. It put us in a tough negotiation with the client. The impact of that was about $70,000 in additional costs. So we immediately sat down with the client and we communicated our position. We both wanted to be transparent to the customer because really the customer should not suffer for this. This was a behind the scene negotiation. And so we agreed to perform the tasks and invoice the client monthly for the food, or actually for the labor and the cleaning. And we did an amendment and we took it out of the return that we were supposed to give. But the really kicker here was that we had control over the situation. And based upon our performance and can-do attitude, we exceeded the expectations. It positioned us to add another line of business to our portfolio. So when the facility services contract went out to bid the following year, we were awarded that business, which was another $1.5 million, creating a win-win, and we streamlined our overhead costs. So out of something that really was negative, the attitude coming in and trying to find a win-win solution became something positive. But I would highly recommend reviewing your contracts from top to bottom and understand them thoroughly.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. You know, chef, from your point of view, chef's role, it's a little bit different maybe when you're thinking about controllables and, how does that intersect for you? And give us some examples of what you're looking at with your teams.
Yeah, for sure. And so, going back to the P&L, going back to basics, right? And you touched on it earlier. Controllable costs are controllable, right? And so when you look at your P&L, those are costs that you can make an impact. You can't fix. You can't pivot on your fixed costs like rent. That's uncontrollable costs in my opinion. And contract negotiations later. But what you can do with controllable costs is make a difference, right? And so with that, again, I referenced earlier the nickels and dimes, right, versus the dollar bills. And so controllable costs 100% the same way. And I know you mentioned earlier about paper products like the towels, like even kitchen towels, right? A lot of times if you throw a bag of 100 out, 100 are gone at the end of the shift versus giving 2 out per station, right? And then you house them. And if they run out or at the end of service, you give them a couple more for wipe down and cleanup. You're able to get, maybe 2 days worth out of that bag of towels. But also looking at, for me, I think I always call it tunnel vision, right? And so when you have tunnel vision, you're not aware of your surroundings, especially in the kitchen, right? And so I always teach my team to get rid of the tunnel vision and look around at your surroundings. Like, so when you walk from, your prep station to the walk-in, observe everything that's going on. You can see a million different things and challenge yourself, right? And say, like, make an assessment as you're going through your day. Like when you walk in the morning, is the grill turned on and at 7 a.m. and we're not open for service until 11 a.m., right? So it's several hours of burned, energy, and, your carbon footprint is going to be increased by that. It could, your fryers, ovens, all that stuff, does your office and storerooms have dimmer switches or, motion sensors in them so the lights turn off when you're not in the room? Looking at even trash assessments, right? Your garbage line, right? It is a controllable cost, right? Because if you're getting 5 days of pickup, right, maybe you can reduce. At one restaurant I worked at, we didn't compost. The city came to us and said, hey, we want to do a compost program. Would you participate in it? And they said, well, it's free of charge, right? Because it's going to get renewed energy and things like that. And so I was like, 100% we're on board for it. And so with that, was able to reduce our dumpster size by 50% and cut our pickups by 50%, right? And so it saved us, on a monthly basis, maybe a couple $1,000s annually, larger picture. But I think, again, having that mindset is looking at every component of it. And is it intentional? Can I make a difference on it? Can I make an impact on it? Because, again, it's the nickels and dimes that really add up to larger impacts and financials.
Absolutely. We 100% in that. And before we go into some Q&A, I just want to bring us back to what this session has been about, and that's aligning our operations and our impact. Everything we've discussed today, from optimizing food, labor, and controllables, it comes down to one simple idea. Operational excellence is sustainability. So when you tighten your food costs, you reduce waste. When you improve your labor productivity, you elevate the guest experience and you strengthen your teams. When you manage controllables wisely, then you also conserve resources and protect your margins. And here's the truth: businesses need to be in business to do good, right? So when operations run smarter and more efficiently, you can create that stability and profitability that make those long-term sustainability actions possible. So each of these drive measurable savings in the middle of your P&L and measurable progress for the planet. So thank you for that. And that's all about aligning operations and impact. They don't compete, they actually compound with that. So we have one great question that is on our Q&A, and one that just stands out to me for you, Tony. And I'm gonna talk about this because it came in at the beginning, Tony, but you were talking about that gap between pricing and inflation. And so what additional recommendations do you have to close that gap on pricing when clients want to allow it? That's a tough question. So I don't know. I'm throwing you like a fast pitch ball, maybe not down the middle. I don't know. Tell us
Yeah,
more, Tony.
it is a great question because, as I said earlier, sometimes operators were slow in getting that price increase when inflation was unprecedented, right? So you had this gap, and hopefully today you'll get some tools in how to close that gap, but there still may be a significant gap. And thinking about some of the best practices throughout my life, and when you're faced with a situation where you could not get pricing from the client, there's a lot of different steps you can do. One is a couple of them, like you have a salad bar by the ounce, right? So what you can do is introduce a vegetable dish by the plate, but you got to make sure that you shred the carrots and the celery sticks because you get some engineers that'll build a really large thing, but you could actually add something there. The menu engineering of bundling strategies, right? When you go out for lunch, I look around, 70% of the people have iced tea, but we don't have iced tea varieties in our operation, which is a low cost. So you start bundling with iced tea. New items on the menu, things like smaller plates at a higher margin, a la carte items, extra thick gourmet items off the grill. There's things you can do to get off that pricing structure, made to order concepts. You can also look at theme day promotions. If you did a theme day, every week, you'll generate additional profitability and additional sales, and you price it at a good margin and a flow through, right, with your menu engineering. Temporary increases, right? When eggs went up, a lot of restaurants raised the price of eggs. You can go to your client and say, hey, listen, we need to raise this on a temporary basis and pull it back. 60%, if you look at desserts, cutting desserts in half and charge 60% of the sale price. Give them 50% of the dessert. People want to eat, end up on a dessert, something sweet, something a smaller portion at 60% of the price. So there are things you can do. There's some negotiations that can stem the tide until you're ready to renegotiate the following year. But again, it's that innovation. It's taking best practices and strategies. And when you understand the business and you're running a tight middle, then you can start doing these things and actually measure the incremental impact on the bottom line. Hope that helps.
Yeah, that's good. Chef, I want you to have the last word in this here. I know we had some questions and some other things that you had a couple of more examples in there to talk about. I want to make sure you get a chance to share some last thoughts with us.
Yeah, appreciate that. And so I'll touch on the pricing and inflation question as well. And so Tony had mentioned it, 100% menu engineering. We didn't touch a whole lot on food costs, but 100% food costs. So understanding your systems and tools. So if you do have, a spike in cost of goods or procurement, things like that, then supply chain, we understand that there's always the increase in costs are affecting us. But really, it's as culinarians, as chefs, it's important for us to understand where your food cost is, and also opportunities, right? And so you can manage your food cost from week one, and be able to hit sub goal is usually what I always do. Drive it hard week 1 and 2, and then that way week 3 and 4, then you have a little more flexibility with your menu, with your engineering, but also even like touching briefly on tariffs too. Understanding that that's a challenge that we're facing right now. That's not going away. Hopefully it's sooner than later, but also it's in my opinion too, it's like looking at that as an opportunity, right? And so supporting local, right? Eating what's in season, right? And so those things are really important, right? So that part's not a bad part. And then also with that too is I call it food choice architecture, right? And so where are you putting your menu items? Like on a health bar, are you putting your healthier items versus what we really want to do, right? And so then your higher cost items may be towards the end, or your healthier, like from a grab and go cabinet, right? Your healthier options are the right at eye level first thing you want to grab, right? Which typically or historically have run a better cost anyways. And so really it's those who are interested in it, it's right there in front. Those who want to indulge, the opportunities are there, but really highlighting those healthier options is definitely an opportunity for your guests to accept it and be happy with their choice.
Absolutely. You know, we didn't get to all the questions today. There's still questions coming in that I'm seeing on my screen. But I think that we will try to get those answered and get those back to you when we do our follow-up. We will add the list of items of the actions that you've been seeing today that continue to grow and get better at this. And so we'll add those. So you'll have 60 plus actions that you can take advantage of by the end of this. So thank you so much, Rick and Tony. We appreciate your time so much and the stories you shared. So again, I know we only scratched the surface of this. Absolutely, we did. But I hope that some people can walk away with having some ideas of at least a couple of actions for the 5 to 7% middle of the P&L. There are many actions you can take. And it's, again, all the while advancing sustainability and operational excellence. So my call to action for everyone here, pick one. Find one item that you can take action on and let us know your results. So you've got direct links through LinkedIn to me, Rick, and Tony. Feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. We'll send you information about this conversation through follow-ups. So thank you very much. And on behalf of our speakers, our 4XI team, thank you for joining and have a great day. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Rick, I need to get that watermelon rind recipe.
It did sound good.
Coming your way.
Awesome.
Bye. Thanks all.
Thanks, y'all. Take care. Bye.